Limerence is like being a lost puppy, begging any stranger to love you enough to undo the past lack of connection. I found this comment on YouTube and nearly 6,000 people can't be wrong here. Limerence doesn't mean love. It means non-stop obsessing about someone you often barely know. And this is not healthy. It's rooted in early trauma and insecure attachment patterns. The link between childhood trauma, attachment wounds, and romantic obsession is so valuable to understand, and this is why we'll uncover it in today's video. Furthermore, I will also show you how you can distinguish between limerence and real connective feelings, and I share an approach with you what you can do to resolve and stop obsessive infatuation once you're in such a situation. A lot to cover today, so let's get straight into it. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and this video is based on my own experience and work with therapists. I'm not a healthcare professional myself. Instead, I share a client's perspective here on this channel, and I recently also started an online community for people like us with childhood trauma. And in that community, I share everything that I learned while working with 3 different therapists on trauma and attachment wounds, and put that into more than 30 video courses and practical exercises from therapy, so a guided step-by-step path that you can follow along as well to resolve limerence, attachment wounds, and many other trauma symptoms. You can join the platform today. Just go to understandable.net/join, get access today, first link in the description. Okay, limerence. When you hear limerence or infatuation, they sound a lot like having a crush on someone. The difference is here that having a crush is something nice, while limerence and infatuation have an obsessive character. In case you came never across around that term of limerence, here is a quick breakdown of what limerence actually is. Now, limerence is a present emotional preoccupation with a significant obsessive character. So it's the first dot we can draw here in our model that I built for today's video, because we want to connect those 3 dots now. The first one, limerence itself, so romantic obsession. Throughout the video, you will see how the 3 dots connect here. Again, limerence, to pinpoint that in the model, is an emotional preoccupation with an obsessive character, also called romantic obsession. It is always an attachment issue as well. And in our adult life, it usually shows up in the crushing phase, for example, when you are dating someone or in the beginning of a relationship, but it can also show up when you just meet someone, or when you just maybe have a match on an online dating app, or you have a quick chat on the internet. Limerence feelings always have a melancholic and desperate character. So when you feel limerent, in your head or subconsciously, you might think something such as, please take me around the other person. Please let this be the perfect match, the perfect relationship for me. Please, I wish finally for comfort, for shelter, for a true fulfilling connection. And to make that more relatable and understandable, here are some common experience signs of limerence. When you experience limerence in your daily life, the feelings for the specific other person, for the limerent object, as we also call them, they come on fast and strong and often out of a sudden. So you meet someone, you have a match on the internet, on an online dating app, and boom, limerence is there. you feel that you somehow need that person. There's also a strong sense of obsession and urgency around that connection or relationship or potential relationship with the limerent object. You feel somehow addicted and seek the attention of that person. We often also see the other person as way better than us, so we put them on a pedestal. We feel that we need the other person to feel fulfilled again somehow and feel extremely attracted to that person in a weird sense that we cannot really explain. It just feels like we need that person. Neediness is coming out here. It can also happen that we feel insecure about that potential relationship or around that potential connection with that person, and therefore we are very careful on how we behave and communicate with that person. We also overthink often every little detail on how we behave around that person and look for signs and signals in the behavior of the other person that they might like us, which then fuels us and this mood and also the fantasy we create around that person. Or we look for signs and signals where we're really scared of that the other person may not really like us. Now, these were the very obvious issues with limerence because it makes your life pretty chaotic out of a sudden. And there's also a deeper underlying reason behind that I want to explore now with you. So the next dot to connect here are attachment wounds. So limerence is closely tied to attachment, as I said. Now, limerence is simply spoken the symptom of an insecure attachment style that we often learned within a toxic home or a difficult family situation. Now, how does that behavior of limerence influence our attachment style? Well, when you meet someone or you're dating someone, then you will have an unhealthy desire towards that person. What happens then to us is that we instantly imagine a bright future with that person. We think about scenarios such as moving together, marrying, we wish for close contact with that person, like cuddling with that person, kissing that person, feeling close to that person, and also wishing for connection and shelter. What we do here is we project our need for love on them. We create a fantasy in our heads that includes the other person as the main character. And this fantasy often can't be further from the truth because it's often even inappropriate or unreal if we barely know that person. This is what's the main significant element is here. We often don't really know that person, so we only have this bright fantasy of them. And this is what being limerent basically means in regard of attachment. We are often more attached and in love with the picture, with the fantasy or the vision we have of the other person in our mind than actually with the other person. And I want to repeat that because it's so important to understand. Limerence means we are attached to the fantasy of another person, not to the actual person. And that means you're also idolizing the other person in your mind. Like this here, I created a graphics here. So in your mind, maybe you see yourself with that person in a bright future. Maybe you guys will marry. You see yourself kissing every day. You see the other person, if it's a woman, getting pregnant. You see yourself maybe having children together, and you have such a great relationship that you maybe never had with your parents. The other person is so good. They have a great career path. They are always the best ones. They're just this amazing, perfect fit for you that you always wished for. But what you do here quite often is denying the actual reality that the other person maybe doesn't even want to marry and he would never marry you now or would think about marrying you now, of course. Maybe they don't even like to kiss because You don't even have a real connection here. Maybe the other person doesn't want children in the future. Maybe they don't have a great career path. They're not always the best, okay? So you have a way different image here in your mind than what the actual reality of that person is. And this could create very problematic situations in your adult life if you build your relationship on limerent feelings. Many people do that. They meet someone in their lives, they're instantly in that limerent state, and then they try to build a working relationship around that. Limerence is not a good indicator for a working relationship or for a good potential partner. And even if you make it into a relationship out of a limerent state with someone you felt before, limerent around, it doesn't mean that you resolved your attachment wounds this way. Now, this way people might create an emotional affair with another person as well. Could be a scenario, even when they are both in another relationship or marriage. What could happen then is, let's say you are in a long-term relationship or you are in a marriage and your feelings toward your partner already decreased, so you're not very limerent around that partner anymore, because now you experience how reality actually looks like in a relationship with that person. But then another new person comes into your life, and this person becomes a new projection area for all of your wants and needs, for your fantasy. Then this could happen here, that you actually create an emotional affair with that new person, and then you might ignore your family, you might ignore your current partner, which triggers also a lot of guilt and shame in people. And this is what I mean when I talk about attachment wounds here, because the attachment wounds didn't heal just because you are in a relationship or in a marriage with someone. And those attachment wounds usually are a result out of a lack of attachment, of close connection and love that you experienced early in your life. And if we grew up with such a lack, we constantly run around with a black hole of neediness within ourselves. We need love. We need closeness. We need validation. And we run around with that feeling that we need all these things for our entire lives if we didn't get them as a child. It's like we are looking for a missing puzzle piece in the puzzle of our life here. And the missing puzzle piece could look like this. I've created this visualization here, this model. So we have a crazy black hole feeling of emptiness, of the need for love and connection. And what we think, what we need is love, validation, and acceptance from the outside, from another person. So we project those needs on another person we just met. And therefore, let's connect the dot here again and see how attachment is linked to limerence. Now we have limerence on top, and on the right side we now have attachment. And the issue with attachment is that we are using others for the compensation of poor attachment and the need of love through the projection that we do, because we are projecting on the other person and create a fantasy with them. Okay, now after understanding the connection between limerence and attachment, let's take a look where this mess actually has its roots. Let's talk about childhood trauma. One thing is for sure here, there are various basic needs that children have. And in the book, The Myth of Normal, I think I have that here. Yeah. This one. Okay, in that book, Dr. Gabor Mate lists up at least 4 basic needs that children have. And those are, number 1, the attachment relationship. That means a children's deep sense of contact and connection with those responsible for them. Number 2, a sense of attachment security. So to allow the child to rest from the work of earning his right to be who she or he is. Number 3, the permission to feel one's emotions. So to have the ability to feel the full spectrum of emotions. If you want to download that, by the way, we have that free workbook, understandable.net/book, where you can get the full spectrum of emotions if you want to look at that for yourself. And number 4, the experience of free play. So to have the ability to play and to express one's needs and desires. Now, we have also a course in our community where we go in depth around those 4 basic inner needs, and we also explore there which needs we as humans have. But for now, those 4 are required for every human being, and the consequence out of them is that every child has a need for a safe home basis. That's for sure. Now, children also need a person who is truly interested in them. They need a special connection and the sensation that they feel desired. And when you don't get those things from the parents, children will seek it elsewhere, and it becomes a lifelong habit that expresses itself as the symptom of limerence in our lives. So we can summarize here: when the basic needs of a child are not met, they seek it elsewhere, and it can become a lifelong habit. Childhood trauma also sets up some vulnerabilities for limerence, and those are no secure attachment to one or both caregivers. That means when you had many fights, for example, with your parents because your parents were not being able to regulate themselves, to express their needs and to also fulfill your needs as a child, when there was a lot of chaos and never a stable connection, when your parents were sometimes a source of love, sometimes a source of threat, when there was alcoholism or drug addiction in the family, when one or both parents were narcissists or they had narcissistic tendencies, when a parent was mentally ill or they were immature themselves, or when they were overwhelmed by themselves and couldn't self-soothe. Also, number 2, feeling anonymous as a child, not being heard, not being seen, not feeling important to anyone. When number 3, other siblings were more important or more valuable than you. When number 4, you have been parentified. Or number 5, basic needs are met, but you personally never felt valued, or that someone desired your time and presence as a child, right? We have those toxic homes where from the outside, objectively, it seems that all the needs were met, but inside people were starved. They are starved because they didn't receive the love, validation, and attention they also needed. For some of us, if we reflect on our behavior, limerence already came up very early in our lives. And signs of early limerence here, if you think about it, are often if you had a lot of crushes back then. I have that, for example. When you had a long-lasting crush that you still remember, even if that was when you were 10 years old. When you had fantasies about getting adopted. When you had a fantasy about a friend's family that had a safer environment would adopt you as a child. When you had fantasies with teachers, with people who have authority that might also adopt you, or when you had crushes on celebrities when you were really young. And when I thought about that, I also can tell you a few stories here where I thought that in myself, for example. For me, I had crushes on girls since I can remember. And I had my first girlfriend in kindergarten already, and I was craving physical contact and connection with her like crazy. And I remember that back then it was kind of weird for boys and girls having much contact, because we were always like, girls, and boys, okay, for the girls, of course. So we tried to hide the relationship that we had back then. And in my kindergarten, there was a tiny forest where you could hide a bit. And I remember that one day I was craving like physical contact with her. I just wanted to hug her and just feel the connection with her. So I asked her, her name was Laura, by the way. Laura, I don't think that you will see that, but if you will see that, Laura. So yeah, one day I asked Laura, what do you want to do? Should we play with the car? Should we go playing in the sand? Or should we just go and hug ourselves? Or should we just go and hug each other? And she was like, yeah, let's hug each other. And we went there in that tiny forest. We just hugged each other, felt that connection, and we were standing there for, 10 minutes. But no one saw that, and we were just there enjoying that deep inner connection that we maybe both wanted and didn't get from our parents during that time. So it was always very exciting. Our tiny hearts were beating, and we were just looking forward to those tiny moments of connections that we were seeking from each other because we felt somehow that need. I also once had a crush on a female cartoon character on television when I was young. She was a fairy from a Christmas series, and one day I was just sitting in the winter garden in front of the window and was desperately waiting for that character to come to Earth, rescuing me and giving me all the love and closeness that I was longing for. So when I tell these stories, I see how limerence actually works, because it was quite often just a sensation that was arising pretty quickly, but also then leaving me pretty quickly. So it could jump, and I could be limerent on one person, and the other week I could be limerent on another person, and it just wouldn't change the intensity of the feeling. It wouldn't change the need behind that, because what I see through those stories, what is basically behind that feeling of limerence is that basic need for love and connection and closeness. What I read in many comments here on YouTube as well is that getting rescued is a huge fantasy for many people who feel limerent. For example, getting rescued also by authority people like teachers or like celebrities. And what people imagine then is that they would love to get adopted by them because they fantasize of having a bright and perfect future and family life with them. Already as children, they imagine that life in a celebrity family or with a person who is an authority, who has it all together, that life would be way better in such a family constellation. And therefore, let's connect the third dot here, which is childhood trauma, which connects in both directions to limerence and to attachment. And childhood trauma describes here the aspect that the roots of all that, of an insecure attachment style and of the symptom of limerence, are a toxic home and family system where the child's needs for love, connection, and shelter were never met by one or both caregivers. Another thing that I would like to mention here is that we can definitely categorize limerence in the cycle of toxic shame and guilt as a form of a coping mechanism in form of addiction. Just next to drugs, sex, work addiction, sports addiction, etc., to make life more bearable for us. If you haven't watched the video about toxic shame, I will definitely link that to you below as well and up here so you can watch it, because limerence is to be categorized here as well. Okay, and now before we get to the solutions part, let's also talk about how to recognize if it's limerence or a true connecting feeling, because that's also very important and interesting to distinguish, because it's very difficult for many of us. Now, distinction number one here is that limerence appears in your head and connection and sexual desire, for example, appear in your body. While limerence appears to be mainly in your head, so it's a more heady feeling, sexual desire, physical connection, they appear to be more in your body. And for me, for example, in the stomach area or below, this is where I feel connecting feelings. Limerence, that's up here. Also, limerence is a hammering and very impulsive sensation in your head that makes you feel like you're in a tunnel, like you're super aroused, you're wanting to send 30 text messages in a row, while sexual desire and physical connection is more a grounding and calm sensation that makes you feel very powerful and not very vulnerable and aroused. You can simply ask yourself the question, if you are with the other person while you have sex with them or are in a physical connection with them, are you truly with them or are you more in your head? Are you truly connected with yourself and the other person, or are you living in a fantasy while being dissociated? Distinction number 2, it's limerence when you fantasize about someone when you're alone, instead of enjoying real time with them. When you just met someone or you're in a relationship in the beginning with another person and you think about them a lot when you're alone, fantasizing about them, for example, how you would go with them to the park next time, how it will feel when you hug and kiss them intensely, then this is most probably limerence here. Especially if you have never met that person or you just met them once or twice or chatted with them online, this might be a sign of unhealthy attraction and obsessive romanticization of the person here. Distinction number 3 is limerence disappears as quickly as it came. And I described that already through my stories of my childhood where I had a crush on many girls and it would switch extremely fast from one person to another. So basically didn't have anything to do with the person itself. It was more about my need for connection and the fantasy that I built or where I use those people to build a fantasy with. And this one is actually a pretty classical one because it's so interesting how quickly those feelings can be gone if you actually just felt interested in someone. And those feelings especially disappear quite quickly if the other person communicates to you that they're not interested in you, or if you scared them away with your neediness and clinginess and they just drop you. Just hours, days, or weeks later, you might already be back to normal and realize that it was just obsessive limerence. What also could burst the bubble of limerence are tiny dissents. An example here is, let's say you love dogs and hate cats, and the other person says something to you that they're a cat person and not a dog person. Could instantly burst limerence because you're so disappointed. In those scenarios, you can definitely be sure that it was limerence because in securely attached relationships, those things would never come up at all. Maybe if you're allergic to cat's fur here. Distinction number 4, limerence is more intense than a crush and has an obsessive character. You might ask, well, when we talk so much about limerence here, isn't that just a crush somehow? And isn't that all just a normal part of life somehow? The answer is yes, somehow, but it depends to which degree. Because if the sensation is significantly disrupting your life and the life of other people, and if it's causing feelings of frustration, feelings of panic, of fear in you, and it's harming your mental health, then it's not just a crush. When you're limerent, it's also in a way disrespectful towards the other person because you are not really appreciating them as they are. You are using them for your fantasy. Limerence also has this really obsessive character. It can also reach up to codependent behavior, which I created a video about up here, link that in the description below. And healthy relationships don't have this obsessive character at all. In those securely attached relationships, people are more independent. Okay, now let's finally talk about some solutions here as well. The fundamental solution for limerence is to shift the focus from I need the person to complete me, think about the puzzle again, to I have to do attachment work. And to do so, we have to get in touch, first of all, with our inner child and our inner adult and learn to identify, to understand and distinguish between real feelings that we have and needs, of course, and fantasies that we create in order to try to calm us down and to get those unmet needs of connection, closeness, shelter, and love met through that fantasy with another person. This way, if you can distinguish those, we can learn which part of us causes which emotion in us. And the goal is always, of course, to express our true sensations towards someone and show the most authentic version of ourselves. But if we try that in a limerent state, things can become super weird and tricky here. Let me explain that to you. If you self-reflect on what you really feel towards another person and why you feel this way when you are in a limerent state, then you can self-expose yourself and catch your inner child while being active, looking for love, validation, and closeness. Example here, okay? Let's say you went on a first date with someone and you feel very obsessive with them. Then the simple truth is that the other person you often just met, they didn't do anything that actually could make you happy. How could they on that first date? Because let's look at that objectively. What did happen here? Maybe you went for a walk with them. Maybe you went for coffee with them. Maybe both of you spent some time talking with each other, or the other person replied to a text. But is this the true and deep reason why you're happy now? Maybe. But maybe you're also just happy and feel so obsessed with them because you project a ton of future expectations on them and see them as your rescuer who finally offers all the love and connection that you ever wanted. But then you might say, whoa, Robert. Okay, I went on that first date, but it escalated a bit and we didn't just go for a walk. We ended up here, did some hanky-panky. That's a lot of connection and the other person wanted me as well. Yes, possible. But what's also possible is that the other person is also insecurely attached, has their attachment wounds, and you both projected a lot of your needs you never got fulfilled in the past onto each other. So there were a lot of needs for closeness, for connection, for physical contact, maybe even a lot of sexual desire in there, a lot of connectiveness that was not met in the past. So if you have been on such a date, whatever you did, but one or both parts of you somehow felt extremely excited and happy, up to an extended obsessive character, then your task here is to reflect on that and to recognize in that moment why you behaved like this and where the needs for the things you did actually came from. Were the interactions you had with the other person actually out of a true interest and out of the need to build a true authentic connection with that person, or that they came out of an attachment wound and unfulfilled needs from the past? So to let this obsessive infatuation go, the skill to learn here is to lay down the glasses of interpretation and start to realize what actually happened. What also can help here is to ask yourself, what could a neutral person observe here that's actually happening? Well, they would see two people are walking, they talk with each other, and both seem to be caught up in a conversation. That's it. Okay. So the final solution for resolving limerence is to learn to self-center yourself. What does that mean? That means experiencing and naming your emotions as how they are. And if you want, also express them what you feel. Same for your needs. Identify your clear needs. Where are those needs coming from? Are they coming from early wounds, or are they coming out of what you need right now? Be brutally honest with that, because only that way you can resolve limerence and expose yourself. And at latest, when it comes to your boundaries, you will 100% realize in a limerence state, you are disconnected from yourself. And this is because there is no way to express emotions, needs, and boundaries, especially in a healthy way, when feeling obsessive limerence. It's just not possible. If you want to learn these 3 skills, expressing emotions, communicating needs, and setting healthy boundaries to break limerence, I definitely recommend you our 30+ online courses and therapeutic exercises that you can access on our premium platform. I created this pyramid model, a step-by-step path that you can walk to learn those skills. So on level 1, staying connected with yourself, learning to self-center and re-regulate. Number 2, feeling and expressing your emotions. Number 3, communicating your needs. Number 4, setting healthy and realistic boundaries. And on the top levels, you also learn how to build self-worth, trust in yourself, and how to connect again with your true, authentic self. You can join the platform now at understandable.net/join and get access today. And now I'm pretty curious if you identified yourself as being in a limerent state. Have you identified that you have been limerent for all the time and not being in love or just having a crush? Definitely let me know in the comments. If you want to support the podcast, leave a 5-star review, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And I see and speak to you next time for another episode here on the channel. Have a great day.